So, when you think of Iran, what comes to mind? Probably sanctions, right? Maybe regional conflicts, nuclear talks. But here's the thing, there's this huge paradox that gets missed. Iran should be rich. I mean, super rich. It was basically set up to be a global superpower.
I mean, think about it. The country has everything going for it. Insane amounts of resources, a perfect strategic location, a young, smart population. It's like the perfect recipe for success. And yet, its economy is a mess. So what on earth went wrong? That's the big puzzle we're going to unpack in this explainer.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start with just how big Iran's potential really is. Then we'll dive into the strange system running its economy from the inside. After that, we'll look at the sanction wall, the currency collapse it caused, and wrap up with the very real price of power.
Okay, first things first. Let's really get our heads around the scale of Iran's potential. We are talking about a nation that, on paper, has staggering advantages. Honestly, it's the kind of setup most countries can only dream of.
Let's put this into perspective. You know how Qatar basically built its entire modern wealth on natural gas? Well, Iran has even more. We're talking the second largest reserves in the world, just behind Russia. That alone should have been a golden ticket.
And wait, it doesn't stop there. Not even close. When you look at oil, Iran is an absolute giant. It's sitting on the third largest proven reserves on the planet. So you've got a country that's a heavyweight champion in both oil and gas. It's just incredible.
But it's not just what's under the ground. It's about location, location, location. Iran has a hand on the tap of the global economy. It co-controls the Strait of Hormuz. That's this tiny, vital channel where a full 20% of all the oil traded in the world passes through every single day. Talk about leverage.
So, you've got all this wealth, all this strategic power. You'd think the economy would be booming, right? Well, get ready for the reality check. Iran's GDP per capita is projected to be around $5,300. To put that in perspective, that's actually less than Ukraine, a country literally in the middle of a war. That is the paradox we're talking about.
So what gives? What is holding this potential superpower back? Well, the first big clue is found inside the country itself. It's this really unique and kind of strange economic system that just doesn't operate like anywhere else.
And to get what's going on, you have to understand a key term: bonyads. Now, these things started out after the revolution as supposed charities built from seized assets. But today, they've morphed into these gigantic business empires that control huge chunks of the economy. We're talking everything from hotels and soda companies to car factories.
And just to be clear, these are not small-time operations. Bonyads control something like 20% of Iran's entire economy. That is a massive chunk, and it's all operating under a completely different set of rules. And here's where it gets crazy. Imagine you're trying to start a regular business in Iran. Look at this. The bonyads you're competing against pay zero taxes. They get free money from the government in subsidies, and they don't have to tell anyone how their finances are doing. I mean, seriously, how is a normal entrepreneur supposed to compete with that?
Okay, so on top of the bonyads, there's another huge weight on the system: government subsidies. The government shells out about $100 billion a year. That's billion with a B, to make sure things like gasoline and bread are super cheap. Now that helps people get by for sure, but it's an absolutely massive drain on the country's finances, and politically, trying to get rid of them is like touching the third rail.
All right, so that's the internal picture. Now let's look at the second major piece of this puzzle: the crushing pressure from the outside. You just can't have a conversation about Iran's economy without talking about sanctions. Decades and decades of them.
And yeah, this is not a new thing. The first U.S. sanctions hit way back in 1979. Since then, it's been a series of waves, getting more and more intense, especially because of the nuclear program. There was a little break in 2015, but then, boom, in 2018, the heaviest sanctions came snapping right back, effectively cutting Iran off from the world. So why did these sanctions bite so hard? It's simple, really. Look at Iran's economy. It's built on oil and gas. About 60% of all its export money comes from it. So when the world sanctions that one sector, it's like targeting the country's main artery. It chokes off the primary source of cash.
And so, to get around this, Iran is forced to rely on a massive black market network. But it's just so inefficient. Imagine you need essential goods, like medicine, or even just a spare part for a machine.
The order has to get bounced through all these different middlemen, shipped on secret routes to avoid getting caught. By the time it finally gets to you, it's super late, and the price has been jacked way up.
So what do you get when you mix a warped internal economy with this intense external pressure? You get a perfect storm. And for the average person in Iran, the most devastating consequence has been watching their money become practically worthless.
Let's go back just a decade, to 2015. At that time, $1 would get you about 30,000 Iranian rials. And we're talking about the unofficial, black market rate, the one everybody actually uses. Okay, now fast forward. That same single dollar is now worth around 900,000 rials. The value has just fallen off a cliff. Think about that. It's lost more than 90% of its value. Just imagine your entire life savings vanishing into thin air. The numbers have gotten so huge, so ridiculous, that people have just stopped using the word trillion in everyday conversation. Instead, they say toman, which is just a simple way of knocking off a zero. It's really just a way to cope, kind of like how we might say 10 grand instead of spelling out $10,000.
This whole situation led to something really weird. At the same time the economy was cratering, Iran's stock market was going through the roof. But why? Well, as this quote puts it, it wasn't about getting rich. People weren't investing because they thought these companies were amazing. They were just desperately trying to get their money out of cash, to put it into anything that might hold its value while their savings were evaporating.
Okay, so we've got the internal system and we've got the external sanctions. But there's one final crucial piece to this economic puzzle, and that's the massive amount of money spent on projecting power outside of Iran's borders.
So to keep its influence across the Middle East, Iran funnels a lot of money to allied groups in other countries. Just between 2012 and 2020, the price tag for that was an estimated $16 billion. Now just think about that. That's $16 billion that wasn't spent on schools, hospitals, or fixing the economy back home.
And maybe the biggest cost, the most heartbreaking one, is the human cost. When you have a situation like this with so few opportunities, what happens? Your best and brightest people, they leave. This brain drain of Iran's most educated and talented citizens is estimated to cost the economy an unbelievable $150 billion a year. That's just lost potential walking out the door.
So there you have it. That's the puzzle. Iran has all the raw materials of a superpower, but it's caught in this trap of its own design. A broken internal system, suffocating sanctions from the outside, and expensive ambitions abroad. It literally has everything it needs to succeed, but it seems unable to actually use any of it. And that leaves us with the big, lingering question. Will Iran ever unleash its full potential?